So during these last 2 weekends, I had the chance to play Halo Infinite for the first time. I got to play against bots, human players, play BTB, and so on. My overall first impressions of the multiplayer are mainly positive, and that's something I thought I'd never say after seeing many head developers quit in the last 6 years, watching the campaign back in 2020, and the news of Forge and co-op being delayed again. To say that this demo makes me feel much better about Infinite is a breath of fresh air. I think that the multiplayer is shaping up to be promising, and because the purpose of this tech preview is meant to give feedback to 343, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Even if they never see this, if any Halo YouTubers watch this and find anything I say insightful, feel free to use part of this video as feedback for 343. Now before we get started, as is customary with Halo related topics, I have to remind the audience that this is just my opinion. I'm not a Sony pony, I'm not a 343 or a Bungie fanboy. I'm a Halo fan, and that's all you need to know. So, first things first. In terms of core gameplay, Infinite is fantastic. You can tell that a lot of time has been put into developing the gunplay, and not only do most of the weapons sound great, but the vibration patterns and congruence have a surprisingly nice waveable impact that complements the amazing audio. I don't think I can remember the last time I noticed or spoke highly ever of a game's controller vibration, but there's just something different about it in Infinite. Another thing that surprised me was how much I liked the maps. Despite what I was hearing online, I have to say in my honest opinion, that Bazaar potentially could be one of the best Halo maps I've played in a long time. In fact, this is the first time in a while that I've actually enjoyed playing Halo again. It reminds me so much of my Halo 3 days, and that's a good thing. And speaking of Halo 3, equipment's back, baby!
So good.
I'm not gonna lie though, I was a little disappointed when I first tried the grapple hook. I don't know if they nerfed it since the tech preview they had a month back, but one thing that I did not enjoy up front was having to guess how much closer I had to be to actually use the grapple hook. If a player has to fire the grapple 5 times and move closer after every fail, wondering why they can't grapple, to me that seems like bad game design. Maybe I'm wrong, and either way it would be frustrating, but I personally would rather have the grapple hook not fire until it is in acceptable range. If you look at the operator Maru from Rainbow Six Siege, there are 3 different indicators of range limitation: a reticle bloom effect, a sound effect, and a red arrow. This lets the player know the limited range without having to blindly guess. While I wouldn't want there to be a red arrow on the wall or surface being fired at, as that would be visually annoying, I think just simple things like removing the failed animation, having a sound cue that makes it known to the player, and highlighting the transparent equipment box red as a signal would be much less frustrating to the player. And if I'm being honest, I think that the grapple hook range could just be made a bit tad longer. It doesn't even have to be increased by that much. Trust me, I completely understand that too long of a range would be overpowered, but I think we could add just a little more. Apart from that, I think it's safe to say that the grapple hook is an amazing new feature added to Halo. As for the other equipment, the repulsor is amazing. The fact that there are so many ways to interact with this piece of equipment, from thrusting yourself in the air, blocking projectiles, and knocking enemies back, just shows the potential of the Halo sandbox. I will say that the drop wall shield seems very useless to me. It has its place, but I think most players agree that the shields break way too easily. The drop wall reminds me of equipment like the radar and the flare. Good on paper, but in reality, it's useless. Another thing I would love to see 343 fix is how homogeneous the grenades and equipment currently look. In Halo 3 and Reach, the equipment and Spartan abilities were unique and identifiable.
They all look unique and identifiable.
But in all seriousness, each equipment in Halo 3 had a different color, and some had different shapes that made it easier to identify in the heat of the battle. I can't tell you how many times during the flights that I thought I was picking up a grapple hook, and I instead got a repulsor, or thought I was picking up spike grenades and mistook them for dynamo grenades. Yes, memorizing the map layouts can help, but the problem is when it's dropped from a downed enemy player in the middle of the battlefield. If I need to get somewhere quick and I only have 2 seconds to quickly analyze my window of opportunity to escape or collect, I need the sandbox to be easy to identify, and the items I mentioned currently are hard to distinguish. Moving on, some more things I absolutely love that they added was the ping system. As someone who has played Rainbow Six Siege, this is a warm welcome in my book. The fact that it tells the names of the locations being pinged, and there are separate colors for enemy players being tagged, is just phenomenal. Making map callouts available to everyone is something that I really like. However, while the radar does give map callout titles, as of the last flight, its range needs to be fixed. The radar may seem like a small, minute thing to talk about, but in fact, it is just another vital key to what made Halo's multiplayer successful. In 4v4 maps, by the time enemies pop up on your radar, you only have a split seconds window of turning around if the enemy is behind you. I think Infinite's radar isn't too far off from what it should be, but the range needs to be fixed. In terms of weapons, the assault rifle finally feels good. If you guys at 343 could just nerf the range of its damage, I think that would make the AR perfect. As for the gravity hammer, I am with the majority. While I don't mind the delayed swing for balancing purposes, please change the physics and the sound effects for the gravity hammer. Unfortunately, while the gravity hammer is a regression in Infinite's evolution of Halo, 343 has put to rest one of the biggest problems I had with the previous title. In Halo 5, while I didn't get the chance to experience it at its peak, in my brief time of playing the game, one thing I noticed very quickly was how hard it was to get used to the controls. Unless you were on a PC where you could bind your settings, it was practically impossible to find a balance between the new settings and the classic feel. But with Infinite, that problem has been solved. This is the first Halo game that will allow you to set your controller settings without being forced to use some bullshit preset since Halo 1. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the classics, but this is something I have always wanted in Halo. In terms of the vehicle play, Arish is completely right. For some reason, the Warthog and the Mongoose lack weight in their movement, and the only way I was able to control the turning was to hold down the brake the whole time. On paper, I like the idea of the Warthog having dynamic destructive elements, but the problem it faces is that now the Warthog blows up too quickly. In every Halo that I played, I've never had that problem. To say that I'm really worried about the Warthog in its current state would be an understatement, especially if the new Razorback version has the same health, because if it does, this is going to be the easiest overkill anyone's going to get. As for the graphics, in terms of what I've seen of the multiplayer, these are the best Halo graphics I have seen since Halo 3. The lighting is stellar, and I'm glad that they didn't use Halo Reach's horrible flat color palette. Fucking gray. The weapons look good, and the vehicles look great, and the colors pop without oversaturating the image. Behemoth is a great example with the beautiful reflective surfaces on the Forerunner structures, and sand that lays on top of the hexagonal edges of the map. Overall, while I have very different feelings and concerns for the campaign, which is arguably going to be much more taxing and look different, the graphics I'm seeing right now in the multiplayer are very welcoming and a breath of fresh air. During my time on the flights, I played both on the Xbox Series X and on my 3080 Ti. And I understand that this version of Halo Infinite is supposed to be an earlier build, but when things like playing at 4K on PC doesn't work, or you see things like this 2 months before the game comes out, it's a little concerning. There were major stuttering issues on PC, reminiscent of Fallout New Vegas, that could only be fixed by either turning the resolution below 4K or turning off VSync, which causes other problems like screen tearing. Even after the second flight's update, I still was having this problem through the last flight, where even playing at 1440p was choppy. As many also know, there were graphical issues when traversing the menu, and again, I assume that this is going to be fixed, however, it does make me worried. If we're finding this many bugs 2 months before we've even seen the whole game, you have to at least have some type of cautious concern in the back of your mind. I personally am hoping that this is just the flight build and that this is the last we'll see of these issues, but I'm still very concerned to say the least. Overall, despite those things which I hope 343 will consider and fix, if Infinite is anything like the good things I've mentioned, I believe that this game has much potential. At the end of the day, from what I'm seeing so far, 343 seems to have managed the impossible of what every Halo game after 3 has failed to do. Evolving Halo in a way that invites a new generation of players to our beloved franchise, while making sure to not take away from its identity that the fans have supported since combat evolved. I know that this won't feel like Halo for everyone, and I can sympathize and understand your viewpoint. But to a classic fan like me, this feels like Halo 3 evolved, and that has me excited.